I think Godwin the Golden is going to have a much larger involvement with the shadows of the Erdtree than we might be anticipating. Hear me out. This brand new region we'll be exploring is shrouded in mystery, but I don't think it's so new to us. I believe we've been to the Land of Shadow once before already, and it was also under the circumstances of traveling to a foreign plane through another husk of a once mighty demigod, just like we're confirmed to be doing with Miquella's hand being the entry point to the DLC. It is what we perceive to be Godwin's deathbed dream where we encounter his once dear friend Fortisax, and I believe this area is at least some sort of portion to the lands shrouded in the shadow of the Erdtree. What initially made me skeptical about the true nature of this area were the similarities between its scenery and the veil we see in the DLC trailer. Their clear differences though didn't sit quite well with me, but it was through further investigation of the details provided by both the epic teaser trailer and Elden Ring's very own developer Miyazaki, where I was able to find some information proving that just might be the case. Welcome to Figuring Out Fantasy, where we'll be taking a look at the evidence supporting that we've been here before, and how context present within the Lands Between that we've already played through many times before has shown us that this DLC was always destined to be explored at some point or another. Keep in mind that at the end of the day, this is all a part of a theory, and while I believe there are a plethora of leads pointing to my ultimate conclusion, until we have the controller in our hands and are dying to bosses once again in this much anticipated experience, nothing's for certain, and much is speculation. To begin, let's quickly recap the fate of Godwin the Golden, so we can understand how it conflicts with the Land of Shadow where his mother Marika first set foot, and where Miquella might now be seeking a true death for the once beloved demigod. Godwin is son to Marika the Eternal and her first consort Godfrey, making him a descendant of the Golden lineage since he was an offspring of his parents' first embrace with the Elden Ring, before Godfrey was stripped of his grace and banished to the Badlands. Being that the Lands Between were ruled over by dragons prior to Marika's ascent to power, the royal capital would find itself under attack by Elden Ring's prior lineage, though while mighty foes, these dragons would ultimately face defeat at the hands of the Golden Order. But while war was typically meant to bring an end to your enemies, Godwin saw his victory in this conflict as an opportunity to embrace his opposition with offers of friendship and community. The period to follow would see man and dragon alike embracing this Golden Order, denouncing aspects such as those who live in death and aspiring to prosper through fundamentalism. But two Empyreans we should know quite well, Ranni and Miquella, would seek to fulfill their own goals which would surface through a distaste for what the Golden Order could offer. A portion of the Elden Ring exists in the Rune of Death, also known as Destined Death. Originally held by Melina, who many believe to be the Glowmide Queen, Destined Death was sought after because it held the power to grant immortality to gods if it was kept in solidarity, away from outsiders' influence. And so this is what Marika had initially sought after. Her shadow Malekith was to obtain the Rune of Death from the Glowmide Queen, and keep it sealed away within his blade to be used as a boon towards the prosperity of the Golden Order, where now if any god were to perish, they would be resurrected at the base of the Erdtree to live once again. Though the previously mentioned Empyrean Ranni had looked to be free of her binding destiny to become a god as bestowed unto her by the Two Fingers, and she stole a piece of the Rune of Death to be used for her own motives. Ranni used Destined Death to imbue the blades of the Black Knife Assassins with the ability to slay those who would otherwise be immortal. It should be noted that the Black Knife Assassins were composed of the Numens, who were of the same stock as Queen Marika. It's thought that they were responsible for forging the hammer used in the shattering of the Elden Ring, creating it in a faraway land where their kind originated. So if these beings are closely related to Queen Marika's origins, and it's said that she had first set foot in the Land of Shadow long ago, it seems to be a sound conclusion to assume that we may encounter more of these Black Knife Assassins when we travel there ourselves. Focusing back on where we were, Ranni's goal was to be rid of the influence from the Two Fingers, so she sought to discard her Empyrean body but preserve her spirit. She knew that in order to accomplish this, somebody else's spirit had to die as well, and she would have chosen you, the viewer, as a victim, but she saw that you were subscribed to the channel, and decided not to. Wait, you are subscribed, right? You wouldn't have to meet Destined Death, would you? This spirit would end up being Godwin's, and he would go on to be slain in the Night of Black Knives. And while the curse mark of death was being carved into his flesh, Ranni herself perished as well, splitting the mark into two half-wheels. This accomplished her goal of sacrificing her physical Empyrean body while contributing the soul of Godwin's as the second half to a complete death of a demigod. Beyond what Ranni would go on to achieve if we become her lord and initiate the Age of Stars, this event left Godwin as a soulless husk of a once widely respected and beloved individual, granting him the title of the Prince of Death as his remains would go on to reside at the roots of the Erdtree, where a blight of death would consume his entire flesh, and the foundation he was mangled in. This would then lead to the shattering, blah blah blah, Radagon tries to repair it, blah blah blah. Now that the summary is over, it's time to get into the real meat of where this theory starts to gain some legs. It was confirmed by both the trailer and Miyazaki himself that we'll be entering the DLC by touching Miquella's shriveled hand in Mohg's palace. It said how Miquella divested himself of his flesh, his strength, and his lineage to await the return of his promised lord in the Land of Shadow. And after digging a bit, it made me realize that the result of the Empyrean doing so would put the body that lies in Mohg's palace in the same sort of situation as the Husk of Godwyn, which lies in the Deeproot Depths. It seems like the main antagonist of this DLC is going to be Mesmer the Impaler, and through his dialogue in the trailer, it's apparent that he isn't a fan of those who are, quote, bereft of light.
Mother, wouldst thou truly lordship sanction in one so bereft of light?
So if we are to conquer this individual with Miquella, it would be assumed that the Empyrean can also be treated as being bereft of light. And this would mean that to reach this status in Mesmer's eyes, he would have to have divested himself of his flesh, his strength, and most importantly, his lineage, joining those who live in death and operate in direct conflict with the Golden Order. And these circumstances sound a lot like the course of events in Godwyn's story, since who he is now is the Prince of Death, another direct conflict with the Golden Order, placing him in the same pool as Miquella when it comes to being at an impasse with the royal lineage. All of this culminates in the possible perception that Godwyn was divested of his flesh, his strength, and his lineage too, just like Miquella did to gain access to the Land of Shadow. This could be the motivation for Miquella to be traveling in these lands in the first place. According to the Golden Epitaph's description, Miquella was desperate for her half-brother to die a true death as a demigod should. The sword was even especially good at putting to rest those who live in death like Godwyn, being that it was infused with the humble prayer of a young Miquella. It's clear that one of Miquella's personal goals, aside from curing his sister of the Scarlet Rot, was to grant Godwyn a true death. But he wasn't the only one to attempt such a feat, and it's through one of Godwyn's dearest friends where this theory all started. Fortisax, as mentioned earlier, was befriended by Godwyn after he was defeated by the demigod. If we follow Fia's questline, we can confront Fortisax in a deathbed dream at the base of Godwyn's mangled body, and we find him not as Ancient Dragon Fortisax, but Lich Dragon Fortisax. Consumed by the death blight within Godwyn, this mighty dragon now lives in death, and must be taken down to claim his remembrance. While Fortisax himself is an interesting piece of information to look at when it comes to how those afflicted with death blight truly live a life beyond death, it was the location where we travel to fight him which really sparked the thought in my head that we may be more familiar with the Land of Shadow than we think. One of the most distinct aspects of the Land of Shadow is the dark veil that hangs over the sky, and I couldn't help but notice that the background scenery in this area looked oddly similar to that very veil, warping the landscape and establishing a supremely eerie feeling. Now it does admittedly look to have some varying aspects compared to what is shown in the DLC trailer, but there's some niche evidence to back it up. In many Soulsborne games, dreams are used to portray another plane of existence, and as mentioned before, this zone is called a deathbed dream. So the note mentioned by Miyazaki about the Land of Shadow being considered a region entirely separate from the lands between would still hold true were this area to be a pocket of the Land of Shadow. Perhaps Miquella is looking to achieve what Fortisax could not, gain entry to the Land of Shadow and cure this cursed demigod in order to grant him the true death he deserves. This is what led me to believe that not only Miquella's hand will be an entry point to the DLC, but Godwyn's body as well. The website for the DLC says that the player can seamlessly travel back and forth between the two maps, so I'm led to believe that this could mean that we're going to have multiple entry points to the Land of Shadow, and Miquella's hand can't be the only one. Overall, I know this theory stretches things a bit, but there has to be more to Godwyn in the grand scheme of the story, and I'm beginning to think that it's through this DLC where we'll find some answers. Let me know in the comments what you think about the legitimacy of this theory, and if not all the pieces seem to fit in the puzzle quite right, I'd like to hear which parts have more to talk about.